We
Welcome to the Average Andies podcast. I'm Alex, also going name as Sindula. I'm an officer in Coffee O'Clock. Been doing this for what through 2 years now.
Yep.
Um, an easy segue, John. You want to talk about you, how the guild got made, and go from there?
Hello, my name's John, also known as John. I'm the guild lead of Coffee O'Clock. I've been in the guild for I don't know 5 or 6 years now. My brother formed it. He doesn't play anymore, so I helped him form it. And yeah, just been guild lead and raid lead ever since. We started back in end of Legion, beginning BFA as a kind of like casual guild, trying to dip our toes into Mythic. And yeah, now we achieve cutting edge every tier, and we do this all on a 6 hour schedule. So,
Yeah, I think the reason we want to do this and why it's fun to even talk about is that we talk about like, well, one, WoW obviously so much, but obviously also like managing the guild, making strats, playing different classes, like all the litany of things that you do in WoW. But there's like a ton of content that exists in just endless droves about high end rating, like the meta, the specs that are good. You think of content creators like Max and even like Scripe who does stuff before and after world first races or even like class guides, but there's not really any perspective or I guess even more than that, like why we think it's fun is because there's not a lot of like discussion or available content about what it's like to be an average cutting edge guild, right? Like
right.
being anyone who's in the range from like 500 to whatever, whoever many guilds get CE. There's just like not a lot of discussion about that, and it's just we do it so much anyways, right? That I think it's just like fun to force yourself into a format where you're just talking about it and going through all the fun things. And I think there's like potential. I don't know how much there is, especially knowing how we are, but I don't know. There could be someone who maybe is like in a mythic guild who stumbles upon this, who's maybe like a leadership team or just any average person. Just us talking through it could be insightful. There's a possibility, but
I
mainly I
hope.
think just because it's fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, uh, like 80% of the content that people come like release is all like catered to high end stuff. I mean, everyone thinks that they're high end players that like do mythic rating, but in reality, we are all just average Andes at our rank, so. I think, yeah, like what you said, this will hopefully, help people that are closer to our rank. I think right now we're like world 800. We've gotten up to world 500 last year, but yeah, yeah, hopefully this is like helpful to people like that. But yeah, so where should we begin?
I think, I mean, just starting about what's unique about like our guild and stuff. And I mean, in putting it more into even like a formatted point or question is just like how we go about adapting to what we have available to us, right? What I mean is, things like we obviously have consistent players who have been around for multiple years, but
Mm,
they don't necessarily play different classes or specs. And so just talking about like, you know, how do we go about looking at a tier, seeing who our best players are, but then also dealing with, I think one of the hardest things for us is like making a roster slash just like
yeah,
creating our vision of what we think we should do on a fight or for the whole tier, while also fitting in the fact that we do have people who can only play, I
X
don't know, it could
X
be like,
class, yeah, whatever,
yeah, it could
yeah,
be Hunter or something, even though it's not that good, and like figuring out how
yeah.
to adapt, the strats that were made available to us from watching into that. And so even like starting with Raw, like what do you think is the
Uh,
most, I don't know, difficult thing that we have to do with what we have
I,
available?
I I will say like the most difficult thing and like leading a guild or whatever is just getting started. I I don't know if there are guilds that can just like form at the beginning of expansion and just be like, yeah, we want to like go for rank, world 100 or whatever. But at least when we started like forming a guild, it was like a struggle. You get people in there that just want to
Yeah.
like do heroic, and then you got to like try to find people that are on the same goal as you of like going into mythic, and then you kind of like drag the people that only want to do heroic into mythic, and then they're not having fun, and their performance are suffering, and they don't care, like they don't do any research. So I mean, at least for us, like you said, over the past few years, we've been able to get this roster of consistent players, and we're fortunate enough to where the players that are like our core, I guess, like our core 12 to 15 people or whatever, do like want to stay in the guild, even though a lot of them could like go to better guilds. So I think like building an environment that is like inclusive is like a very good thing, and just making everyone feel like they're on a good team, and uh, yeah, it's just it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that we have that I've been able to form, but getting started, it's hard, and I definitely had like tons of roster issues, like every tier into God, what was the worst one? Sanctum. It was so awful, right? We
Yeah.
we barely
Well,
could even get 20 people.
exactly. I think that's like the kind of the fun and like interesting. I should call it like the story of our guild in the past, even the last two expansions when I think it became much more because like you guys were consistently getting cutting edge and like BFA, right? It was like a one tier thing, and then guild kind of disbanded
Yeah,
or whatever. And then
we got formed in Legion, got cutting edge at like Jaina, we killed Jaina, and then the next patch was like when Classic WoW came out, and we were in Alliance guild at the time on like an Alliance server, and Alliance was basically dead, so the guild kind of died in BFA, but we reformed somewhat in Shadowlands trying to keep the core, and yeah, I would say Shadowlands was like a turning point, but even then, like I said, Sanctum we struggled, and obviously before then, before we got our first cutting edge, we struggled a lot just even fielding 20 people to get into it. But one thing like I'll
yep,
say is at least for me is important as like a raid lead or whatever is just trying doing everything in your humanly power to make sure that like you can raid. Like I think the worst thing for a guild is just not raiding. Like it makes people not want to play. Even if like you're short one person, like just trying to find somebody that can sub in or
yeah,
going in like the LFR thing early and just seeing if you can get somebody to come. I did that back in BFA when we were like still kind of new, just trying to see if I can get people to come to Mythic and in the past, even like this tier and like Sanctum and Sepulcher and stuff, just keeping like connections with people that you've played with in the past, not cutting ties and like people will help you if you are like good to them. Like I've had people in the guild for years now that just stay in the Discord and stuff, even if they don't raid with us. That
hmm
happened with an Aberrus. Like Ethan is one that comes to mind. Like he wasn't really playing with us anymore. He couldn't raid with us, but we were short one night, and he was able to come in. So um, yeah, I think just stuff like that is good. Just keeping connections with people that you played with in the past is definitely good. And as far as your question, for for our guild, um, yeah, I would say like Shadowlands is kind of like when
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what you would say. Like,
No, and I think even like my perspective is it's interesting because so I didn't start rating right till Shadowlands like seriously. Like I played in Legion. I was in like some guilds that tried to do mythic rating, but they were terrible. They weren't even you wouldn't even call them cutting edge guilds. They'd just be like guilds that attempted mythic. And I started in Shadowlands, and the most unique thing about our guild, and I guess something we definitely should talk about, is that when I every guild I've been in the past had been like either kind of weird, like the people were a little weird, and just like the whole mentality was odd. And we've even seen this like sometimes we talk to new recruits, like this just came up where they'll talk about their leadership experience in older guilds that they were in or the guild they just came from even. And like that kind of thing that I think plagues a lot of lower ranked guilds is like there's a lot of like selfishness even in terms of leadership and stuff like that. But when I joined this guild, the most unique thing to me was like our environment and like how fun it was to raid because I'd always been and I
hmm
think I always have been like a seasonal gamer so to speak. Like I really get into a game, I'll do it for a few months and then I drop it. And that's
yeah,
always been my approach to WoW. Like I would just do it, try to raid. Maybe I used like PvP in the past, but like in Shadowlands, I joined this guild and it was like a completely different experience to me. And I think like 80% of our success or more is probably attributable to like the environment we have and the how everyone, we have a lot of people who are really good friends who
hmm
even in the downtime, right? Like when we're not necessarily raiding, like when we're re-clearing or taking breaks and stuff, we all still are like staying in touch. We're like talking a lot in Discord and stuff, and just still maintaining that like same you call it culture, right? Like our guild culture
yes,
still is always very prominent. And it's like that is also extremely important. I think it's like definitely the strongest point of our guild is that I think there's a lot of people who are above the skill level of our rank,
yeah,
but because it's fun to do it the way we do, and also we're 2 day 6 hour guild, so it's not like we have a ton of time to actually progress or anything like that. And like one bad night can throw you off a lot, but it's like the way you maintain the guild and like you said, like the connections you make and just making people want to commit to it is like really important.
yep, yeah. I mean that's something that I try to uh like always. I've told you this before. Like just constantly. I mean, I know I probably talk a crap ton in raid, but like just always making sure that the vibe is good in the raid. Like I'm always like in between pulls, like cracking jokes or like even during pull, just trying to make sure that the environment's not like toxic or like we're going down and like the vibes and people have said that to me, like they're in other guilds and it's just like the environment there is like toxic and stuff, and you know, they just like go in, they don't talk outside of raid, they go in, they talk in raid, that's it. And then as soon as the raid's done, like they just all log off and they don't like talk. But yeah, I think it's very, very important to have like an inclusive environment, a fun environment. And I mean, like
Yep.
at the end of the day, you're just playing games with the boys, and you know, that's I mean, obviously your objective is to increase your rank each tier. That's what ours is at least, and you can definitely like have fun, while doing so. So.
Yeah, something kind of interesting. So we both are we're officers in this guild, right? And it's something that maybe we didn't even like plan to talk about, but what do you think is like important as an officer? Like, what do you think we need to do to be like credible and maintain the environment and have people to like listen to what we say, and not even listen to it, but like trust in our decisions? Like, where do you think that comes from, or do you think like there's any problems that we have with that, or it is just kind of that kind of thing? Like, what do you think the ideal officer is, especially like in a guild of our ranking?
Uh, I, that's a good question. I think the ideal officer is one that can just like say something, like message a guy and say, if they weren't doing well in a fight and they just like were absolutely just not doing a mechanic right and you need to bench them, like the ideal officer is just gonna go in there and do what needs to be done. But I think something that we're good at is it goes back to just that inclusive environment, just making sure everyone's on the same page. And especially as like a raid leader, I think the most important thing for an officer is to know everything in the fight. Like you don't
Yep.
like you want to sound confident in what you're talking about, and if somebody says something that's wrong, like you want to be able to correct them, and like you just need to know everything about a fight. I think that is like absolutely the most important thing, because if you don't know what's going on and somebody else like says something, and I mean it's like it's not like I'm perfect, I've done that stuff before where I like forgot something or I thought something maybe worked differently, but I think for me at least the most important thing for an officer for like raid leading at least is knowing a fight. Now as far as like your healing officer and stuff, obviously like they're more involved in looking at logs. I mean, I look at logs as well, but I think they're more involved in looking at logs. So for healing officer, I think the most important thing is understanding all of the alien classes and how they work, and just being able to analyze the logs and use cooldown placement. And I mean, there's other stuff that goes into being an officer. That is important. Like outside of
Yeah.
raid. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean that is a big thing. And I even like in terms of individual like skill, or I don't want to necessarily be like you need to be like insane at the game or anything, but
No.
like I think it's more you need to be like one, you have to like develop credibility where you're not the person who consistently messes up the things you
Hmm.
like complain about or do things like that, but also you the bigger part of being an officer is definitely just like maintaining the environment and stuff. And it's kind of hard to like put into words, but also being someone that, you know, I guess it's just like basic leadership stuff, but you have
Yeah.
to be credible enough that people listen to your like in the moment calls, and also they trust you to like manage the guild entirely. Because I feel like that's a big thing that doesn't exist in some guilds, is that like the people, the average raider just doesn't like really either appreciate or uh like find credibility in their officers. Like they're not really good at what they do. And the
Yeah.
word like officer to me like in guild is always like kind of weird, but like it's just you need to be able to one, like foster the environment, but two, also like have the credibility that people trust you're doing the right things in terms of who you're putting in fights, the strats you're
A-
making, and like they don't need to question your, you
And
know,
and I mean
ability to.
some of that just comes with like just playing the game with them as well. Like
Yep.
outside of raid, doing keys with people, like they just come to trust you more and like listen to what you have to say, that like as far as being in the guild. And one thing I will add to that is like my damage may be dog shit, but I guarantee you uh, for me at least, just do not friggin' die. Do not be the first one to die. That is like so important to me. I have like one of the lowest deaths in the guild. Like my damage may not be stellar, but for me at least, just like staying alive and seeing the fight longer is super important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. It's just kind of funny thing to think about. I feel like it's like you can't really do anything with it unless you are, an officer in a guild, but there's like a lot that goes into it, and it's more than just being good at the game or like linking Raiders videos, which is something I think we've ran into a lot. Just like how do we get better? And it's not just like presenting material for people to look at, but also like for I don't want to say forcing, but like having like a guild meeting to go over stuff and all that fun. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to
Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
think I've ever like even
cause you,
asked you that question, so it was kind of
well, yeah,
fun to
you know,
think
like,
about.
I know, I'm sure in every guild, like, you link a video, like, put guys, please make sure you watch this, and like 3 out of 20 people watch it. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it's a game at the end of the day. It's like hard to force people to do it, but yeah, what we just did last week was, we just had a mandatory meeting during raid time in between patches and just kind of went over everything. That way, there's like no excuse for people not to know stuff because everyone was at the meeting. So I think at least for us, that was like a good step in the right direction because we've definitely had issues in the past where eh, people just it was obviously apparent that they haven't like done any like research on the fight, and it's like what are you gonna do at that point? They're in the fight, and sometimes you only have 20 people, so you just kind of gotta suck it up, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like a big thing. If anything that we've learned over like the last since I've only been doing, playing in a leadership role since the end of Shadowlands,
Hmm.
and that was all fresh to me. But like I think the biggest thing throughout this expansion in Dragonflight has been like it's very important not to just know the fight yourself, but you need to be able to like make that the knowledge you have digestible into all your raiders. Because when you go into
Yep.
a fight and like half the raid doesn't know what's going on, you're spending so long just viewing the fight as like a learning process. And there's so many things that can be avoided if people just know what's going on going into a fight. And
Yeah.
like even at times, like even this year, like I think the one fight, the second worst one, like
Scarring.
Forgotten Experience, like we
Oh
struggle with
yeah.
that. No, that's the first one. But like that one we struggled because like there was a we just didn't actually know what was going wrong. And that
Yeah.
probably just stemmed from like a lack of preparation, and we just like couldn't really like in the moment, literally wipe over wipe, just trying to like chain pull a boss to get it killed. Like we just couldn't really figure out exactly what was
Yeah.
going wrong with like the spells. And that like that's obviously something on us, but there's also just like a lot of stuff in every mythic fight where if people have literally just seen it, like they just watch a VOD and go through that perspective, you avoid a ton of pulls, especially if it's a multi-stage fight. Because like if someone just goes into it blind and there's multiple phases in the fight, like you're spending, depending on the difficulty of the fight, like 5 to upwards of like 50 pulls if it's an M boss,
Yeah.
just learning phase by phase. But then people are obviously still going to make mistakes in the early phase, and it prevents you from getting to
Eh,
the end. So it's like making information digestible for people in your guild is like extremely important. It's
And
something we
sorry,
try to do
and
better.
it's like if everyone just goes into the big picture, like that's great because even after everyone has like just let's just say everybody knows like the dungeon journal head to bottom, like even going in after that and WoW, there's just so many like tiny like minute little things that can change based on like comp or like a push timing, or it's like you still have stuff to learn on the fight even if you know the entire like all the spells that he's doing. Like
Hmm.
another like forgotten experiments, the push timings, like if you pushed him 5 seconds early, like it changed the whole like dynamic of the fight of like when you're supposed to master the spell and stuff. So even knowing the fight, like like that's so important to know beforehand because once you go into the fight, even if you know it, like obviously the early bosses are gonna be super easy or whatever, but there's still like so much like just small things that are in the fight that you still have to learn on top of like the additional like the actual mechanics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think even I like one of the things we wanted to talk about since we're basically talking about it now even is like how we go about making a strategy. And I think there's a lot of it that's obvious, right? Like as a guild who is obviously going to have plenty of time to see how the higher rank guilds kill bosses,
Hmm.
there's still a decision you have to make about which strat you think is best. And like I think we ran into that like last year on Broodkeeper, like picking between the push
Yeah.
fast and like
Yep.
skip an ad or just deal with the ad things. And obviously we chose wrong initially, and that's that. But like I don't know, we can just talk like our process. I think mainly revolves around finding a like literally just a VOD or even a strat guide in a lot of cases if they do exist. But like especially when you're going into a tier like right now, all you're gonna get is like PTR footage and
Yeah.
um like the way and you I mean you just made a video about this, but talk me through it. Like how are we going about formulating our initial strategy and like predictions for how we think the fight's gonna go?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, watch watch the PTR videos. For me at least, I go onto the PTR. I can never really do the testing because of work. I usually see if like some of the raiders can do it because like you've done it this at least this past one for me. You did a bunch of the bosses. Um, and other people have as well. But I see if anyone see if any one of the raiders can do it, and then obviously I'll talk to them, and then after that, like when it's getting closer to like at least release, and I guess we can kind of talk about like a new tier, like prepping for 9 bosses, and then um like once the tier's out and prepping for like the later bosses like one at a time. So I guess I'll start with the new tier coming out for 9 bosses, let's just say.
Hmm.
So yeah, so PTR whatever. So I'll go into PTR, read the dungeon journal, and I will like try to figure out what the boss's mechanics do. Like I will actually just read all the mechanics. I'll do it on heroic. And I'll just like, okay, this kind of seems like this is how it works, and I'll go through all that. I'll skip like the tank stuff most of the time, and then what I'll do is I'll pull up a VOD from PTR, and I'll just like go through it, and I won't even like pay attention to the fight really. I'll just look for like the one mechanic. So I'll start at the top, like for example next tier, Gnarlroot. Like I'll look for control burn. I'll be like, okay, when's he casting that? When's he casting that? I'll see what it does. Okay, I was right, or oh, I was completely wrong. This mechanic works. Because some of the stuff in the dungeon journal is like kind of confusing on what it actually does, like the way they write it. So at least comparing it to a VOD is very important. But obviously things on the PTR do change. But yeah, so once I have like an understanding of the boss, for me at least, I'll start like writing out a guide in the Discord. I'll like go through all the abilities and the mechanics, and I'll post like gifs and clips and videos and stuff in like each boss has their own channel in our Discord. And then after that, like I'll go into the raid leader Discord and see if like anybody has any like, useful information on the boss, and I'll paste that in our boss channel. Um, and then after that, it's kind of just hoping it doesn't really change too much from PTR to live. And like I said, we just had a meeting last week. I think that's like important just to make sure that the people are looking at the stuff before the actual raid comes out. So just having maybe a meeting or something, or even just sending stuff like individually to people. I've done that in the past as well. But yeah, so just to recap, just go through the dungeon journal on PTR, get an understanding of the boss, compare it to any VODs you can find, write out a guide, and just like I said earlier, just make sure you completely understand the boss. Because the more you understand it, the easier it is to talk to other people about it.
Yeah.
And then as far as like, so let's just say we're like 3 out of 9 mythic, and obviously at least for me, I usually just prep like the first few mythic bosses, because by the time we clear those, the actual strategies will be formed by like the higher up guilds. So, um, let's just say, I'm prepping for like the 7th or 8th boss or something. So at that point, like a better strategy is already formulated. Usually there are other guides out there, but what I personally do is I'll just make like a private YouTube video, and like I will use like actual people's names. So I'll be like, okay, here Syndulla would move. I'll like go over a raid plan. I'll be like, all right, so here Syndulla will move here, and I'll use actual names. I'll be like, okay, you four, and list their names. You'll move here at this point and here at this point. And it's usually just like a 5 10 quick minute video. But I really think like it helps when like I think it's just easily digestible from people, like of me going through it, because you'll hear like the calls I'm making as well, and just kind of going through that and showing that video to people. I think that's like really helpful, and I'll kind of like break, like I know for Razageth at least I did like phase by phase. So like I did like
Yeah.
a phase 1 video, phase 2 video, intermission videos, and I think those like really helped in that process at least. But yeah, I think that kind of covered everything. Do you think anything I missed, you think, or?
No, no, and I think that's like, well, yeah, one the big like one thing we've gotten better at. I think the most useful tools, like you said, like we made videos for, especially when we're approaching a part that is clearly difficult for us, or just it feels like people are understanding what we actually want them to do. Because like WoW is so mechanically dense now. Like all the mythic fights are so much going on, and
Mhm.
we see it all that like it's not uncommon to get to a point and like as the people who prepare for the fight and are making like our strategy, and we talk through it a lot too, like we also like have to figure out what's going wrong with our what we're doing and stuff. But like it's not uncommon to get to a point in the fight and then someone gets a mechanic they haven't gotten before and they just basically wipe you because they don't know what's going on and stuff. So like
Yeah.
making those videos and just you have to, the hardest part is definitely like figuring out which parts of the fight you need to focus on the most in terms of
Yeah.
making sure your people know about it, like the raiders know about it. It's like there's different stuff, and like obviously you don't need to go through and like whinge on about dodge mechanic because like that's obvious. Everyone's just gonna pick it up. Like there's something pointed at you, there's a swirly on the ground. That's all obvious. But like where you're taking thing, like in the most like irritating one on Sarkareth was like when we get to phase 3 and it was like the second or third black hole would spawn and it get like spell ward and you take it to the pillars.
Oh
Like
yeah, and
I
like no,
swear, like half the
dude,
people
that's
didn't even
like
know where to take it, and it's
crazy,
like
man.
yeah, and it's being called too, but they just don't really get it, or they're like unsure if they're getting spell ward. Like they don't get that they're getting spell
Hmm.
ward, even though we've said it a bunch of times. So it's like you have to. It's like the hardest part about creating a strategy is predicting where people are going to have the most difficulty performing it, and
Hmm.
so like that's something that you just like yeah, like making videos and specifically talking through it is like super helpful. Or I guess you could just alternatively do something more often, like we do I guess what we did last week with like making a, guild meetup where we talk through a boss and stuff, but
Yeah,
it's hard. It's just like difficult to
it
predict
is.
what's going to cause you the most
And
stress in a fight. And then also like so many things that play out way differently than when you watch like a world first guild do it, that, they're
I
playing
was
with the
gonna
best
say that,
players
yeah.
available.
And it's like the strategy changes so much from when they do it to like to us. It's like
Yep.
it's usually like a whole different like strategy. Like I know like Sarkras has that whole like no go down phase. Like we didn't try that, but I know in the past like other bosses just have like completely different strategies. And one thing I will say that helps me at least is if you have time, just like to watch a VOD of a higher rank guild, like progging the boss on Twitch and just kind of seeing like what wipes them, because that'll definitely like
Yeah.
save you pulls. Like, okay, they're wiping to this like 5 times in a row. Like, let me be prepared for that and make sure everyone's like, okay, this part's coming up, it's hard. Like, make sure you know what you're doing, stuff like that. So if you do have time, I know it's a lot, but if you have time to like watch a higher guild progging a boss on a VOD, like not a world first skill, but maybe like like a world 100 or somebody. Obviously, like somebody that's ahead of you. Just seeing where they're wiping and where their struggles are definitely can be helpful.
Yeah. I know, I agree, and I think it's the most that is I think also though the thing I enjoy the most about like doing this is actually the problem solving aspect of it in terms of like playing the game itself is fun, right? Mythic rating and actually playing your character and doing the fight is
Hmm.
fun, but as like a as like someone who is helping with like strats and stuff or just thinking about it, it's like those in the
Well, it's
moment
like a group effort
adaptations.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it, like, revolves regards, like, 90% of it is just, like, getting mad at the tanks or something for not, like, putting something somewhere, right? But, like, it's just fun to, like, in the moment, have to think about that stuff and be like, "Well, what can we do with what we have available to fix what's going wrong and shit?" That's
Yeah.
the most fun part
And that
of
goes back to like something I
doing
said
this.
earlier, like knowing the fight on a broad level and like what all the boss does is awesome. Like everyone should know that. But then like when you go into the fight, there's more to learn. Because your comp like may not be able to do some certain
Yep,
strategy that everyone else is doing. Like our comp usually sucks. Like we usually only have
it
like one
does.
one pally if that, and we're usually like lacking something. I don't know why we're like this, but I guess it kind of leads back to something maybe we can talk about later. Just like people only able to play like one spec or one class or whatever.
Yeah, I guess I could say you can think about like Sarkareth. Like we had such a hard time killing the big ad in phase 2. Like
Oh
I
yeah,
wouldn't say like such a hard time, but if you watch like if you had like the meta comps, you had like probably double arcane mage, you had like a devastation evoker, and then like a rep pally and all this other stuff. Like that thing just like it's a non-issue. Like even watching like one of our other raiders was in another guild and like was
like
struggling
a
to get
guild
cutting
that
edge like a good
yeah,
after us,
like a month
and
after us to get cutting
they
edge.
had no issue with that. Like they wouldn't even tank the ad in like the rewind thing, whatever it was called, would be up on the ad, and it would still just get like
Just
obliterated.
melt,
And
yeah.
meanwhile, us were like fighting for our lives
We
before
got like two
transitioning into
boomies
phase three
just
to
like
kill it. Yeah,
going down, like sweating, like no unholy DK. It's like what the hell's going on, man?
yeah, and that's also I guess it's kind of fun about being lower in kill. But yeah, like that other point is I'm trying to think if in the past, like so for what I feel like is extremely common in lower rank guilds is that like you have people who are not capable of multi-classing or playing something else. Like even
Right.
if it's meta, and even on their own class, it's not like super uncommon to have like I don't
They
know
can't
like
play
what's a
any other
hybrid like
specs.
a yeah like you're not gonna find a lot of BM hunters who also can play survival proficiently. That's kind of an extreme example, but even
Like I do not
I don't
want
know,
to
it
see
could be
Lenny
like
play survival, man.
exactly. Or
Yeah,
like an unholy DK who can't play Frost. Like just like completely different play styles, like something like that, you know?
yeah.
Is there I'm trying to think if there's ever been any like situation. I don't think there has been where like on a fight because one of our players who's like a one trick and has been since they started playing WoW when they were like 13 or whatever. Like I feel like it is almost always more of a
It's like
liability than any like pro. I've never seen someone do this like some cool tech with their spec because I feel like that stuff also gets figured out
I
pretty
feel like a lot
quickly,
of it
but
is like healers too. I feel like that,
oh yeah.
most DPS can play like their other spec if they have one. Except actually Boomies, like Boomies do not play Feral Druid, and I'm one of
Mhm.
them. Never playing Feral. I mean Veggie can obviously, but like, I don't know if Mardru does, but yeah, I'm not playing Feral for sure. And like you said before, Hunters playing. It's either usually BM or MM or Survival. It's usually not all three. But yeah, I think healers are like one that like, Demise, he's like the rest of Drew a god, but uh, he ain't it on any other healer. That's kind of funny how,
Exactly,
how
yeah.
that works, right? I don't like tanks do it a lot. Like they play all the tank specs,
Yeah, yeah, I think commonly that's just like I mean, you have to as a tank, I
I
feel like, because
guess. Yeah.
you're mainly there to bring a buff, like, that's, like, the biggest thing you have to cover, and obviously for us, like, we don't run into that a lot because of, like, we have people who only play the one class, and we have, raid buffs covered by those classes, but I think over it doesn't ever I don't think it's, like, a huge issue except for maybe what we're talking about, like, you only have by the end of the tier, we've been in a situation a lot where we, like, barely even have 20 people available, and so
Hmm.
you don't have the luxury of switching the comp, so you have more funnel damage or, like, hard target swap damage, it's just, like, you have to work with what you have, which is also important for like making your strategy or just looking at it and being able to understand like, okay, this guild did this. Like, I don't know. You could like look at Liquid or Echo's POV, but their whole comp is designed perfectly around like are the most optimal specs for like
Yeah.
A to B in the
I
fight,
mean, a perfect
and you
example
don't get
for us
that.
is like Ratshok this tier. Like we literally didn't have
Yes.
any DR healer. We didn't have a Devo or a barrier. So we're like going into the last slam, and it's just like we all got to get into the link and like dodge fires, and it's just like if we had a Devo or a barrier or something, like we could have saved probably like 30 to 40 pulls on that boss, but we were just getting like farmed by that last part just because we didn't have a DR healer. So
Yeah, I think that was like actually the hardest planning boss. Like the execution you could pick up pretty quickly. And I feel like we did. Like obviously it's a
I mean it's an
very
easy fight, like
repetitive cycle. Yeah,
mechanic
like you
wise, yeah.
dodge waves and stuff, but like making our raid CDs work with how that fight ended, especially like not pre-nerf or anything, and
Yeah.
like you're don't have like a super crazy insane like single target comp. Making that work was
Like,
very
yeah,
difficult, and like fixing the
dude, you
note
went
to
hard
be
on that note, man. Like, you were like, all right, Flube go left and whatever the
yeah,
hell it's
trying like
called,
the liquid hover or what's it
hover,
called Zephyr
Zephyr,
Zephyr.
yeah. You're like,
Yeah, like
Flube, you go left
Zephyr to like
and
split
Zephyr,
it.
Tuggo, you
Yeah.
go right and Zephyr, and I'm like just looking both ways. I don't remember which group I was supposed to go in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just stuff like that where it's like it can really stress like your comp and what you have available and stuff. And it sucks. Like in this case of a shock, there wasn't really like a clear answer. And it wasn't like it I mean, at the end of the fight, that slam, especially at the gear you were at, if you kill it like, anywhere in the first like 2 months of the tier, it was like basically a one like it was a one shot.
Yeah,
If you didn't have a
we were
DR
like
available, you
440 or
died.
like
Yeah.
438. Yeah.
Yeah, you like the last slam did more damage than your health pool. So if you didn't have a DR, you just died. Like there was
Yeah.
nothing to be done about it. And then there's still like an insane healing requirement right after the slam and stuff. And like
Yeah, you got
it's
like the
hard to
healing
deal with.
absorb.
Like you
Yeah.
just don't like if you have Devo R there or something, it's super easy to just like waltz through, but it's difficult when you don't and you just have to like figure out how you can squeeze. And the big part of it was like, I don't know, we took a lot of healing out of the intermission because like it was like you just have to heal it with your base kit because
Yeah.
we like need absolutely everything at
Yep.
the end. And like that stuff is just it's hard when you can't just like actively swap around players, put in what's more optimal and stuff because you just like it's just not an option for your raid. It just doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
I'm trying to think other than that, like comp restriction wise for us, like what was our,
Skarn was another big one with like having needing a second DK, so we had to have
oh yeah,
one of
veggie.
our like veggies switch
Yeah.
off from
W-
shaman to
Well, we
DK
had
and
one.
stuff.
That's, and I mean that like adds to our rank. Like we had DKs, and you know, I don't know how to. I mean, this is like another topic, but like just keeping new people. Like obviously we have our core of like 15 people or whatever, but just we get new people every tier, and I swear like by like the fifth or sixth boss, like they're out, man. You know.
Yep. No,
Uh,
yeah, it's totally true. And it's hard too because like obviously you can't bring some people to every fight, whether that's I don't know, maybe they're just not quite as good as some of the other people you have, or like you need, like it could be
or,
like a DK. So like you need
or
to bring
literally
some
comp
stuff to some
restrictions.
fights.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you can't really blame people for leaving, but that's like a very common issue to deal with is like how do you retain people when you can't really get them in on a lot of stuff? Because like I mean you could, but the the hardest balance is like maintaining the guild and like so keeping people happy, but at the same time understanding that we have 6 hours a week to
Mhm.
raid, and what is the most efficient way we can actually kill a boss without like putting our feelings in place of
Yeah.
like what's actually optimal for the guild. Like some people take it way more hard when they get benched than like others,
Yes.
and I wish you
Some
could
people
just
don't
like kind
care.
of no, and like even when like the first year I was in the guild, I got benched for like a ton of stuff, and
Yeah.
it was like a mix of things. If I was in the same situation now, I would care more, but I don't think my approach would change at all. Like I like looked at it and I like was like, I'm not the only monk. I'm not bringing anything essential to the raid, and like even not talking about how good or bad I was like at that time. It was like I understood where the decision was coming from, right? And I think like a lot of people who just raid and you can't really expect them to, but they don't really think like that. It's not necessarily a discussion of like, well, why did I get benched? It's just more they're upset about it or like it
Well,
sucks.
yeah,
It
I
does
mean,
suck
and
to
that
get
was
benched, especially on like a last boss.
like your brother, like I like to call him, like we benched him on like Stone Legion General, and like he wrote me like a 4-page essay of like why he shouldn't be benched, and I'm just like, dude, it's like nothing to do with you. Your class is just dog shit on this fight. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, sorry, dude. I don't really know what you want me to tell you, but some people just react so differently. It is kind of funny. And just like kind of going back to that point of like new people in the guild, um,
Hmm.
like you've played with a lot of, at least for us, like we play with a lot of the same people for like 4 or 5 years now. Like we know what they're capable of, so it is like hard to get new people in, unless it's like something we really need for a comp, like a DK or a healer with a DR. But just I guess just the most important thing for new people is just like staying in communication with them, just like talking them through like, yo, like I'm sorry I'm benching you for this fight, but we'll try to get you in like next week on the reclear if we are reclearing. And I guess that's something else we can talk about is like when we extend, because we extend at least this year we extended really friggin' early. That's like hard. Like if you have like a 24-man roster and you're gonna extend for like the next 3 or 4 months and not kill any bosses, somebody like is just gonna not be raiding for like 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
It's like
Yeah, it's
I don't really know how to get around that, to be honest. That is I'm still figuring that one out.
no, and I mean, I think the realistic answer is that there's just not like if you're especially it depends on the tuning of the raid or how difficult overall a raid is, but
Hmm.
you think of like I don't know how long it took us to do like a fight like the jailer for example. Like that whole tier we obviously caught like all the nerf waves, but even like or like Sylvanas would have been like probably a better example where it took well over a month for us to clear it. And so obviously like if someone wasn't in on that fight, they're just like they're not raiding for 6 weeks, like right. And
Yeah.
I think it also happened in vaults where like with one of our healers who we didn't have in on the fight. We had like 5 healers, but we obviously wasn't a 5 heal fight, so you had to sit one. And we just it, that was kind of like the best case scenario. I think they just started like clearing with like a guild that was their
Yeah.
friend,
Yeah.
like but like not
Which
that's
I'll
hard to
yeah,
you're not gonna find that situation often,
because it
right?
did kind of like screw us one night. I think we needed like one of our healers was out and we needed that one, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, I'm saved," and we're just like, So I don't
Yeah,
know.
but you have to play that balance. Like
Yeah.
if you just tell them, no, you must sit here and never like
Yeah, I
you're
know.
not
Yeah.
allowed to raid. It's like it's I don't know. It's just a hard thing to deal with because you either have to be the person who's like you, hey, you're not in for 6 weeks, but also like don't get yourself locked or don't do anything else on that character because we like might need you.
Yeah.
Obviously, that kind of sounds like a not the nicest thing to do,
It does
but
not.
I, I
Yeah.
don't I don't know how you deal with it. You just have to like find people who are okay with it, and also just understand. Like I mean, like I said, like I've experienced it, like being sat for a cutting edge, and like I was like, oh, that sucks, but it wasn't really the end of the world. And also, you do get in sometimes, and this and that and all. But one thing we also do well is like if anyone has been in with us and like for the tier and has helped us prog a
Hmm.
boss, like we have never failed to get them cutting edge after
Yeah.
the fact. And that sounds like a given for, if you raid 3, 4 days a week because you're gonna reclear a lot and you have plenty of time to do it. But like
A 6 hour guild,
we,
it's
we've
like
had
it's
some
hard.
close calls
Yeah,
with
it's
like
hard.
getting our second cutting edge
Yeah.
kill. Now that they've like accelerated tier releases a lot, it's not easy to do.
I mean,
I
even
think
if
like Sire we got it the week before we could, like
yeah,
last
I
year we
mean that was
could.
like the longest patch, but we were like really friggin' bad back then. But yeah, we got it like literally the week before the next patch came out. So, um, yeah, sometimes it is cutting it close. I mean, not the past few tiers, but the lower your rank guild is, like the harder it is for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Well, I guess like yeah, the TLDR for us is just like in terms of making strategies, like always like don't just take what you see in front of you and think that you can just like
Mhm.
slap it onto your guild. Like you have to evaluate your comp, like what will work, and then also obviously like just look at multiple POVs and perspectives to figure out what's good and stuff. Um, but
And
yeah, it's hard.
something that might make sense to you really easily, like, this just goes in life, like something you might grasp easily doesn't just don't assume that
Hmm.
others will automatically like pick up on it. Like as much as you can, just like try to make things very simple and easy to understand is another thing.
Yes, it definitely is, and that
Mm.
communication skills, because it's just again just a part of life, but
Yeah.
it is much easier said than done to like make things presentable to everyone who needs to see it. So
Yeah, and
that's also
like
a fun
for like
challenge.
mechanics too, and this is like the last thing, I guess we can talk about this and move on, but like I try to stay consistent. Uh I'll literally just like be like, all right, this is like a beam, a dodge beam, a soak circle, something like that. Like instead of like the actual names of the mechanics, I'll just like say stuff like that, just to something everyone's familiar with that like pretty much every boss has. Instead of like saying the actual mechanics, I'll just say like, oh, swirly's coming up, dodgy, soak this, whatever. So, all right. So what is next on the agenda here?
I mean, we
Let's.
could talk about. We can keep this kind of brief, and we can go into kind of the fun, almost like trivia s topics, since we're
Okay.
doing this obviously right before a teardrops on Teardrop Eve.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yep. Yep.
in terms of recruiting, and I think we've covered indirectly a lot of this just in terms of how you retain people,
Uh huh.
but just like our process for evaluating players, I don't even think it's that deep. I mean, I think to be honest, it's kind of a static thing where we have like a mental yes no check when someone applies. Like we have an application, obviously, like every guild does, where you're asked to link, your logs,
Yep.
and that is like a big first indicator of whether or not the person is even like attractive as a recruit. Is It's not like we're looking like, oh, this person doesn't have like orange parses or something. Like a lot of us don't have them either, and also like progression rating, you're not always going to do that well in fights. But um, I guess like, what do you think is most important, or like things that you've learned from the last however so many years about finding people, not just evaluating their skill, but whether or not they'll be like a good fit for the raid?
Um, that's like honestly, that's just like a feel thing. Obviously, they need to like have somewhat decent logs, and I think what I kind of look at least like damage wise, I'll if they have like all gray, obviously, or if we're like progging on the last boss and they're only like 1 out of 9 mythic, that's usually not gonna be
Yeah,
a
it's not a
yes,
good
but
fit for
yeah,
the
but
time.
um, obviously if they have good damage numbers, I will look in to see throughout their tier for their current guild. I started doing this recently. I just like see like simple mechanics, like how many times they died to him, like Rashok, lava waves, like if they were the
Yeah.
most to eat stuff like that, I'll look at that. Because like I said, like damage is whatever. Usually at the point we're clearing stuff, it's you don't need the damage to kill it. I can't
Yep.
remember like the last time a boss has been like a hard damage check for us. So it's usually like most important for me is like survivability. So I'll definitely look at that. Obviously, like I said, you need to have at least be able to play your class at like a comparable level. But after that, I think it's really important to just meet with people in voice. I know a lot of people probably like don't like doing that and just like do stuff in DMs, but I think it's like important to meet people in voice and just like verify like some information, like can you make the raid times, stuff like that, like over your loot process. Because in the past, I've had people that have joined and they're like, oh, I didn't know this was how this worked. I didn't know this is how that worked. And obviously, this is like when we were still
Yep.
new, and I guess I wasn't explaining things clearly. So, one thing for me, like after I am interested in somebody, is in messaging them. I like always talk to people in voice, and I'm trying to think what else I kind of look for.
Well, I think another big thing, the other biggest strength, or like just what's so important about talking to someone, is that you also have to get a read on like the
Yes. Yep.
person. And I mean, we had this happen this year where well, we didn't even know based on talking to them, but like we recruited someone. I can't remember exactly why we thought we needed them, but like they turned out to be very strange in the sense that like they joined our guild, their other guild was like way behind where we were. I think it was after we got in Cutting Edge.
Is
Yeah,
it a
it was. But
warrior?
yes, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Did you I was talking, but like, yeah, like seemed fine enough, like when you talk to them, but then we like figured out they were like they hated someone in their old guild, and they were like sending them in-game mail and stuff, like just really weird,
Yeah.
really, really weird behavior. And like
Eh,
it's
eh,
kind of hard to do, but you also sometimes can just kind of tell. and I'm not even trying to be like rude in the sense that like, oh, is this person like awkward in an interview? Because it always is an awkward thing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they always even like start awkward because it's like, what do I even say right now?
They
Just
just
like, hey,
like
what's up,
join. You're
man? And
just
they're just
like,
kind of yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
dude."
yeah, what's up, man? Yeah, yeah. You just gotta sit there for a second, but it's
Yeah.
like it's always a little awkward. But you also have to get a read, or you have like. I remember the story about the
Oh my
one like
god.
paladin who invented the
Yeah.
glimmer build type thing. Just like there are people that you can kind of you want to make sure they're not actually weird or like the blatant things like you're never gonna take someone who's obviously like just openly like racist or something or like homophobic any
Homophobic.
kind of
Yeah.
thing like that. That's obviously where you draw a clear line, but even less like aggressive than that, just kind of talking to them and getting to the sense of like, why'd you leave your old guild, what do you expect out of this guild, blah blah blah, or this and that. You can just by like just talk to them and having that conversation, you can just
Yeah.
tell if it's going to be like they'll fit it. Like
Like see if
they
they're
seem
actually
like
like
they'd enjoy our
interested.
environment.
Yeah. Or see if they're
Yeah, like
interested. Like, so you might be interviewing someone, they're like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm interested, and then like meanwhile they've been talking to like six other guilds, and they're just gonna ghost you like tomorrow, kind of deal.
yep.
And like even like that example you were just talking about, like I mean talking to that guy, like he seemed perfectly normal too, and like to lead back to that, the reason like that happened is because like our roster, like we just like dropped to like 18 people, or like not even that we dropped, like summer rates kind of like screw us all the time. We just had like
Hmm.
people on vacation, like it was like four people like lined up to be on vacation like July or something, and like we literally had like 18 people that could raid. So kind of like harkening back to what I said earlier, the most important thing for me is like just making sure you can raid that week. So like I just went like ham on like the Tuesday or Monday before the raid, and like I actually just like trying to like poach people, which is something we can talk about, I guess, at another point in time. But like just I don't like to do that really, but like I needed two people, so I was like looking at WoW progress to see if anyone was looking for guilds, and I was just like I messaged like 20 people, and I finally got like a few people to get back to me. I don't think any of them are still in the guild even, to be honest with you, but like that guy is one that like he just seemed normal and he seemed fine, his damage was fine, his logs were fine, and then like we just turn around and find out he's just like sending hate mail to people. And yeah, and even after that we just kind of like monitored the situation and like just realized that that's just like not something that we want to have in the guild, so we ended up just like failing his trial. But it's hard to just even like after the fact and they're in the guild, like people can just turn out to be total weirdos. So I mean like you might have an idea of someone that you think, and like 2 weeks later your whole idea can just be like flipped on its head of what you think of
Exactly
that person.
uprooted. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, and it happens a lot. But I think outside, yeah, it's a pretty simple process, and you also, um, like even for us, at some points, it's kind of a take what you can get situation. And also, there are a lot of people who maybe don't like perform the best in terms of like parsing and stuff. And we have like people in our guild like that. They maybe like they're not doing the absolute
yeah.
peak damage their spec can do or class can do, but they're like very solid mechanically. And so that's where it's like
It's
you shouldn't
yeah.
just like look at someone's logs and be like, oh, you have all like green blue logs. There's no way you're that good. Like you there's a lot of
Uh,
people who put more emphasis on like filling their role correctly and also like the biggest thing, like staying alive is like huge and just being
yeah,
good at
and I think
progressing and
that's
stuff.
like in a guild that's super important to have like an even balance of people that do care about that stuff and like care about good damage, and then others that like, cuz like if you have a guild that's like they're getting like 10 like an overall average 10 of their damage parses all tier, like you are not going to kill the boss, like you are going to run to the enrage. But like
Yep.
having a mix of people that care about damage like push things, and also that like obviously they still care about their damage, but they prioritize like living and doing mechanics like first and foremost. I think that's like a good thing to have like a good balance of in a guild.
Yeah, I mean, even like what you said, I think like we have like completely different philosophies on how we like approach fights.
Mhm.
Like obviously I die like way more than you, probably like
Yep.
in multiples, and
Yep.
because like my approach is more like very I don't mind dying or like taking risks or
Risky
like doing
maneuvers,
something that I
bro.
know is gonna end up being stupid when I do it and die. But like that is also like depending on your spec. Like sometimes there's things where like you have to kind of play more risky, I feel like, or like you just evaporate the second you mess up and stand in something. And
Yeah,
there's a bunch
or
of
your
things that can
class is
happen,
just
but like
like dog shit, you know? Yeah.
yeah, and, like, you just kinda I don't know, like, I'm okay with dying, and I like to think that I don't actually die in important parts, like, later in progression and stuff, but we don't have to get into that or anything, but, like,
Yeah.
I also care a lot about trying to do as much damage as I can, but it's like you said, it's just a balance, like, and you need to have the different kinds of players who are, like and also, like, it boils down to, like, a lot of range specs, for example, are the people who mechanics fall on the most, like, Sark Red bombs, for example, that's gonna if you're
Yeah.
doing bombs, like, we had our mage and warlock do bombs, like 3 or 4 times throughout the fight. Like, obviously, that's a direct hit to how much damage like, it's gonna significantly impact how
Yeah.
much damage you can do because 'cause you're spending the fight doing that, but you need people who are willing to do that and will sacrifice their own damage because it's a necessary mechanic, and you can't just have a bunch of people who are, like, I don't want like, who are just trying to squeeze in as much as possible and, like, like, just blatantly avoiding mechanics because then you're just gonna
Yeah,
wipe
you're
all the
not gonna
time.
kill anything. You're gonna add like 200 pulls to your wipe counter, which is like,
Yeah.
what's more important for you? Do you care about like the pull count or like the time spent on the boss?
Well, I think in reality, it's
Probably
for
like time
my
spent, right?
own collective ego for our guild, pull
Pull time,
count because it's
yeah,
the most comparable thing,
yeah.
but in reality, it should be time spent, and we've
Sometimes we
had,
just
like, I
kind of
can
go in there and like be chain blowing bosses though for like, you know.
yeah, and we've had I think it was, like I don't know if it was, like, Dathi or something involved, but they just, like, did not match up to with the other guilds in terms of, like, our pull count in comparison to our prog time. I can't remember if it was a lot shorter or a lot longer, but, like, you would look at guilds and they'd have either, like, a little bit
Dathia?
less or a little bit more pulls, and I can't remember what fight it was, but there was one boss where, like, our pull count was good. It was one or the other. It was either our pull count was good, but our prog time was, like, weirdly very
Oh,
long,
okay.
or our pull count was really high. I think it was this one. I think our pull count was really high, but our prog time was really low because we kept dying in, like, the easiest part of the fight, or we'd mess up the easiest part of the fight. So that's why I kinda think it was Dathia because we just could not like, the first part of that fight was, like, impossible for us, like, clearing the stacks correctly and even getting to the point we got knocked to a platform when we were supposed to by, like, dropping the charges off onto the ad to turn it on.
Yeah,
Like, we suck so bad at that that we wiped the shit ton, but our prog time was, like, not that long.
I'm actually interested. I'm just quick checking Dathia to see. I think we had like 100 and something pulls on it, but maybe like
That much.
120. Like I have it now. I have it here. Let's see. 98 pulls, but our progress time was like 8 hours, which was less than average. So maybe that was the one you're talking about. I just remember on that fight at least we had like just one pull where we got past like the third platform and it was just a kill from there. So
Yeah, what was the what would you say our prog time was?
our prog time was 8 hours for Dathia
For how many pulls?
and it was 98 pulls. I
No, that
guess
does
well
check out, I
this
guess.
is like this is only this must have gotten skewed for guilds after us because we're like in a low percentile for pull count. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I don't but yeah, for me personally, I think that, like, the whole count is just it feels good to say you killed a boss when you weren't like, under the pulls that the expected average was, especially when you're, like, a guild around our rank, like, if you can do that, it's pretty good because you're competing by the time you get to bosses, you're competing with guilds who are just very
And it can
simply
like
put,
it can
much better than
save
you.
you like you can gap guilds on rank like this other guild that I know is also 6 hours and like they got the Sarkareth or like we were on Magmarax maybe like a week behind them and like they got the Sarkareth and Echo and like actually just kind of like gapped us like they were world like 400 something and we were on Magmarax basically at the same time so
Yep.
yeah so like just being prepared for bosses and cutting down on pull times and pull counts and like you can actually just like excel your ranks by so much by just by like having a really like one really good boss fight and one that I'll like say from our past experience is Anduin. Like we just absolutely destroyed Anduin. It was like 100 pulls and every other kill was like 200. Like we were just like very
Yeah.
very very prepared for that fight. Everybody was like on the same page and we probably would have killed it sooner, but we had like a comp issue one night with like Eric healing, which was sketch as hell. But
Yep.
yeah, just yeah, pull counts are very important, but I think progression time is like what actually matters the most.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right in terms of actually the rank you really get. And there is obviously a correlation between pull count and kill
Yeah.
time or progression time, but like it also usually if there's a skew there, it just means you weren't good, like you were struggling at one part of the fight you shouldn't have. But yeah, regardless, I do agree that's the most efficient way to look at it, and also that like as a 2 day guild, efficiency is what gets you a better rank.
Yep.
You don't have the luxury of just like slamming your
Slam.
head
Yep.
into
Yep.
bosses,
Yep.
so it's all about efficiency. Yeah, but in terms of all this stuff, is there any other specific tidbits about being a guild, managing a guild, or whatever you want to talk about, or should we go into
Yeah.
our
No.
one
Yeah.
suggested by Lenny
I
section?
I do want to say like it is a it is a thankless job, and if you were doing
True.
this, God bless you, man. That shit sucks
Ab-
sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's just so much that
Like
you
there's
have to
so much
do.
that goes into it, and like it's not even like just learning the game. You gotta like manage personalities, and it's like literally like leading a little like team at work, but you're just kind of doing it for free to for a fucking video game. So it,
Yeah, honestly, I feel like managing a guild is, in my experience, significantly more difficult than managing people at a job because there's so much more stake involved in at a job. So even like for
oh
example, if someone
yeah,
doesn't like you in the work environment, you may not like someone, they might not like you. You both might hate each other, but
tough
like
shit.
obviously there's just a general decorum you must adhere to, or else you're gonna lose your job or
Yeah,
whatever. There's gonna be serious consequences. In video games, half the people are completely anonymous. They know they're completely anonymous, so they're willing to do and say things that there's no like restrictions or anything, whatever you want to call like social construct that's like preventing them from doing it, or there's no repercussions really. Like you get kicked from a guild, whatever, you join another one, right? So people are
yeah.
willing to do a lot more, and they're also, I feel like,
And then they
a
flame
lot
you
more
afterwards,
vocal.
man.
Yes, yeah, like you just get so much shit as someone, especially like leading a guild, and you have to deal with all these people who, and like weird cliques can form and stuff, which I feel like we've dealt with before. Just like
Yeah,
areas
yeah.
of like pockets of discontent with you as a guild, like in leadership. And
Hmm.
people, it's easy to blame the people who are in charge, but definitely agree. There's a lot of times where it's very frustrating, and you are getting literally nothing other than the satisfaction of your rank on Warcraft logs out of it. So it's
Yeah,
I agree. God bless anyone doing it.
yep. And just one more thing to add. Yeah, we were like 91st percentile for Anduin. That feels good, man.
Yeah, we
Feels
own that,
good.
boss. Yeah, we need another one of those this year. But
Yeah.
okay, we can go into Lenny's trivia question. So I think we'll both have the same answer here. Who do you think will win the Amir Drasil World First Race, Echo or Liquid?
NA baby.
I agree.
Liquid
I
all the way.
think it depends on how hard the tier is and how things play. I think if it is a week one kill, not even just because of like times, but I feel like it's panned out where I don't know how Nyalotha was actually, but whenever it's an earlier kill, I feel like Liquid performs very well early, and then
Well,
it
it's
seems
like
like
whenever Echo catches up, they just kind of like they're so used to just playing in the lead. The Echo was ahead though last year, but then they turned off the stream or
yeah, and
whatever and just
I guess what
plowed
I said is
through.
not even true because like in Sanctum, I remember Liquid had to take the reset and then Echo killed it before the night of the reset.
Yeah,
So I don't know, but obviously yeah, NA all the way. Got to rep the boys and hope
yeah.
that they
I
they get
do,
another one.
I do hope. I doubt this will happen. Like I am praying that like Method comes in second. I think that would be just so hype, man. Like without anyone quitting, obviously, like in Sepulcher where they came in like third or whatever, and Liquid got fifth. But
Yeah, no, I
I would
agree.
love like for some change. It's like been the same two guilds for the past 10 years at this point, or where the fuck it's
Yeah,
been.
I mean, what can you even really do though? Because
I mean,
everyone,
all the good,
I feel
yeah,
like if you were the best, you just want to go to those two guilds, right?
yeah.
You're probably the reality is likely you're in like Method or those other like top 10 guilds because you want
Like I don't even
eventually
know,
either
like
you're
BD,
okay
like
with their rank or like
yeah, and
want
like
to get
BDG
into.
is like, I mean, I don't know what's going on with them either. I don't even know what they're rating. They lost like half their team. They don't have a sponsorship anymore. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's tough.
Yeah, but
I'm glad we don't have to deal with those kinds of problems. But okay, which class? Okay, which class is gonna be the what's gonna be the like the dark horse of the tier in your opinion? Not even have to be backed up by anything you've seen
Rep
numerically or like
Pally,
anything like that.
Rep Pally.
I hard disagree with that. I
All right,
think
bro.
maybe I'm trying to think overall. I think it's gonna be
Rep Pally like
Dev Evoker.
Survivor Hunter.
I think Dev Evoker. Well, I guess this isn't that like hot of a take anymore because Og just got like so
Oh, gutted.
heavily
Yeah,
nerfed. But I feel like Devastation, just because of how fights play, is talked about a lot. But they do like insane burst AoE, like probably the best in the game at just like actually deleting a target. They're like the Windwalker of Shadowlands, and they
yeah.
also have like incredible single target. So I think since everyone's so obsessed with Og and busy like complaining about it, Devastation will actually just end up like popping off a bit. I don't know if you'll actually
I
like
mean, they were
the
still
world first
really good.
him, but
Like they've been really good the whole time. It's just all came out and they got overshadowed by them.
yeah, they were like in
Like, but
it's like the premier
Whenever
range spec, I
Tuggo
feel
played
like.
Dev, he was like just fucking absolutely cranking in our reclears and
Yeah, and
stuff.
they're also like an insane target for augmentation because their damage is so
Mhm.
especially early in the fight when they're like
MPI,
getting a
yeah.
ton of their mastery effect. Yeah, they're just like so good. So okay, so either Rep Paladin or Dev. I feel like I'm
I
more
think
likely to
Dev's a
win
good
this, but
pick. I like that. That's a good pick
yeah.
actually. Yeah, good pick by
Well, you
you,
can't
man.
change it now. It's Ret.
No, I'm
Okay,
saying Rhett. I'm just saying I like your pick of Dev.
I think Ret just saw. I don't think Ret will
I
be
think
good
you
because they have to.
suck, man.
Okay, hardest boss in the raid
For us
overall.
or for
No. Like, what do you think will be
like the world first
the
people?
And let's say, like, yeah, like, relative to, like, so obviously you'd expect the end boss to have the most pulls by far,
Yeah.
but, like,
All right,
what do you think will
other than
be?
the M boss, for us, Laradar, man, that guy's gonna farm us. I'm feeling it. As far as them, like probably Smolderon, I think. I think he's just gonna be tuned like really hard. Like the damage, I think is gonna be tuned high. But I mean, obviously
Well,
Firex gonna have the most, but I think Smolderon's gonna be like a wall.
yeah, and I hope it is tuned, like, very aggressively and it's, like, very difficult because the mythic mechanic's not hard, it's just
No,
well,
I think
it'll
it's
be
gonna be
very
like
hard for us, but,
yeah, I think it's gonna
like
be like just like a hard damage check. And you got to remember they're going in with like way less item level than I mean
yeah, I hope
that
it
doesn't really matter for them, I guess, but
because they just do, like, a ton of
billion
splits and
splits,
stuff, but
yeah. But I mean,
yeah, okay,
it
so you
will
think
still matter, yeah.
yeah, of course. So and you're saying Laradar hardest for us?
For us, absolutely, Laradar. I'm trying to
I
think.
feel like I'll maybe just to even be a contrarian. I think for even like high end guilds, like in the race, I don't know what the mythic mechanic is for Naimwe or whatever her name is, Nayume, however we looked it up to say it. But
Yeah.
I feel like that fight is going to be very weird on mythic with like your restriction in movement and there. I feel
I
like the
could see
mythic
that
mechanic
one.
is just going to be very weird and difficult to deal with. So I feel like that one might be like a bit of. Well, I could be totally wrong. The myth mechanic could be a complete joke, and it's just like a stupid fight. But if they do something weird with that fight, I don't know what the mythic mechanic is, but I feel like that could end up being actually a difficult fight like, overall for just like every guild.
I could see
For
that.
us,
That's like more of like a personal like responsibility fight, I guess. Like just soaking
it's just
and
a very
yeah.
unique fight, right?
It
Like those
is,
like
yeah.
zones of it's like a
It's
like it's like
fresh.
a
It's definitely
movie
fresh,
where you have
yeah.
to get through like a laser
Like
field.
Resident
Yeah.
Evil, yeah.
Yeah, like something like that. But for us, I would probably yeah, I think Laradar is probably really gonna be a tough one. I also I might just repeat my answer though. Some reason, something about seeing Nimue and like the restriction and movement and all that stuff, I feel like is just gonna suck for us. Like because I feel like it's kind of a gimmicky fight and
Kind of.
like
Well, they both
struggle
kind
with.
of are, no?
Yeah, but probably right about Laradar because if like Skarn was any indicator, whenever there's like
I will
restricted
say,
space that you have to deal with, we
uh,
just do not excel.
for us, like outside of the early bosses, we're gonna absolutely die to Tendril Sage Swift so many times. Like I can just picture like 18 people like just failing at the dragon riding thing,
Dragon
man.
riding, yeah.
Like
That's
Ben
gonna
just
be a fun
actually
fight
just
to
gonna
prog
crash
though.
into a fucking mountain.
Yep.
Yeah,
That'd be so funny though.
yeah.
Okay,
There'll be
this one I
some
guess
good
is
memes.
an Easter egg for only people in our guild. Who will be the biggest loot drama contributor?
Uh, you go first. I don't know.
Um, I mean, I think like Floob is obviously kind of a loot goblin, but it doesn't often
He's a yeah.
transition to anything significant. Like usually you just tell
That's
him
like a DM.
that it doesn't
He's a
matter and it gets
DM.
over
Yeah.
with. Yeah, yeah, yeah. God, who do I think would cause the most?
Uh, I'm looking at the roster right now. Dude,
Well, if we're considering all factors, probably like Mel. Like
I'm
somehow
pulling out a new guy, my boy Poon. I'm feeling it.
you think I don't I feel like he's pretty like part
I
of the
don't
ship,
care,
part of the
man.
crew player. Okay.
I'm getting
That's
it.
fine. I feel like either Mel, it could be Floob, but I don't know. It's always so it's a dynamic situation every tier because like in Vault it was all about like Grief Torch and who gets
What I
that
should do
first
is
and blah
just
blah blah.
say me and then just actually make it happen.
You
Yeah,
could do that.
I could do that.
I
Yeah, I
guess
don't.
I'll be a safe answer and say like Mel will somehow end up stealing a trinket on his demon hunter
I
or
mean, it's
something that.
definitely Mel. Like the question should have been other than Mel.
And if you consider though, if you also consider like okay, just loot drama as a whole, it's not just about who complains, but who's like instigating it. So at the end of the day, I think Mel, because his
Yeah,
response to stuff like that is typically also just more inflammatory. So it'll be, it's just like I think that's an easy, that's a layup
yeah. I'll
answer
give you
there.
that's a layup. I'll just I'll take my dark horse and Poon.
Okay,
I saw him just talking about a bunch of loot the other day, and I was like, huh, didn't know he was
I just
that into
don't. He
loot,
doesn't strike
man.
me as someone who'd really like
He
complain that
doesn't
much. But
me
okay,
either, but I'm just calling it. YOLO.
okay. Which spec will get buffed the most significantly during this tier?
Um, I want to say
You
Windwalker, but
can't take mine.
do you have
Yeah, that's
Windwalker?
mine.
Probably Destro
Yeah,
Lock
well, I even
then.
wrote it down.
Destro Lock.
Yeah, I could definitely. I just think Warlock and yeah, one of those two specs that doesn't look that
Yeah.
good, like either Affliction or Destro, is probably just gonna get juice. But if nothing other than for my own sanity, like Windwalker should and needs to get a massive buff. But it'd be I know it will. I know they'll do what they've done every tier for the past like 5 tiers where they just like slowly are like tuning up Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury till it's like viable or doesn't feel like you're the most useless player in the raid. But I want like a Antora situation to happen like the first week where they just like give it a 20% aura buff and it's just suddenly the second best DPS spec in the game. Now that would be cool.
What
I really
I mean, I don't know. They've like hated that spec for a while now.
I know.
I
Yeah,
don't.
but it's possible.
They got to remake the talent tree like next patch or next expansion or something. They need something, man.
Yeah, it needs a rework for nothing other than every spec that gets reworked is
I have
always
I have
so good.
one more question I want to add. Who do you think is gonna get the legendary axe first in our guild?
Me.
No,
I think I'm pretty lucky with loot, and I think that I will get it. I will loot it first.
it's gonna be death. It's gonna be death.
I will be my
I will
disappointment
bet
will actually
you.
be
I bet you a hundred
immeasurable.
thousand gold it'll be death.
That actually maybe make me reroll
I bet you ten
out of
thousand
just sheer
classic gold the
fury.
death is getting that first.
I don't know about that. Uh, may,
Dude, I mean,
mm,
come on, man. It's like the
you
stars are
you know
just
what? Yeah, in
aligning.
reality, it's either gonna be Death
Or
or
Zeth,
Zeth
yeah,
because
yep,
all Zeth does is complain about how little, like how unlucky he is with like stuff like
yeah.
that. Like he doesn't get drops, this, that, whatever. You know, the old warrior
Maybe
soul,
I'll
all this
change my
stuff.
loot trauma from Poon to Zeth. That might be it.
Yeah, but I think he's kind of similar. Where like even if say it's a situation where he thinks he should get something, I feel like he drops it pretty quickly. He's not really like a
Yeah, I
he
agree.
doesn't get stuck on it too hard. So I wouldn't really. I could see him having things to say about it, but I can't. I don't think he'll be like a large contributor
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, it's if it's not Zeth, it's either Death or Mel. Like Mel's just gonna get it. That'd be so fucking funny. That'd be so funny.
How do you think that works? Like, do you have to be in ret spec to loot the
Probably.
legend? I wonder how they're gonna do that. Do you need to
Well,
be in
I
your
don't know because I mean the AUG one, like it was for all three specs, right?
yeah? It works for
So
everything.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming you'd have to be in red spec, but that'd be kind of dumb. Cause like I'm sure I didn't look at the loot, but I'm sure he drops. I think he does. He drops like weapon maybe or something.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Well, it's all master loot anyways, right? Like, or just group
Yeah.
loot
Well,
rather.
yeah, that's true. That's
So it
true.
doesn't matter what specs you have; it just drops from the loot table, random stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is like well, the other two specs it doesn't they only can they all use. Oh, that's Prot War uses one handers, so that would be different. But like DK,
Well,
obviously, all
probably
three
just
specs.
wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
I guess we'll find that out. But
Can
I really want to be the one who gets it first, but you're probably right. It's probably gonna be Death.
It's 100%.
That's the best prediction.
That's death taxes and death getting the legendary
Yeah,
first.
yeah. What a waste.
All right. Anything else? Any closing comments?
No, I mean, I think we'll plan on revisiting this stuff, and I don't know how often we'll be able to do this, but at least hopefully at least some point earlier ish in the tier when we're actually into the mess of things, and then
Yeah.
like later on in the tier when things are more fleshed out too. It'll just be fun to do.
Yeah.
I'd say like a generous thing is like every 3 weeks we could make one of these, but no, fun talking about it, and I guess that's it for us.
I guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank,
Thanks all 12
thanks Lenny
people.
for listening.
Thanks all 12 people that
12
watched
is
this.
generous. 12 is
Well, we
generous.
have 20 people in the guild. I'm assuming at least maybe half of them will watch
I'll
it.
just give an individual shout out to Lenny, and if he
Yep.
doesn't, if I don't in the next week get a message from him saying he appreciated the shout out, then I'm gonna know he didn't watch it, regardless of what he said. So,
You're really smart. We should do that all the time.
yep,
All right.
there we go.
All right, man.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks everyone. Goodbye.